Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about this thing right here. It is a cold steel Kabutowari, and a couple quick things before I note. One, I don't study exactly how to use this particular sword. I have some idea of how to do it. I've seen some kata done in the various martial arts that I study with things like this or Japanese-style tanto, but more specifically, probably better used something like this. And I got this secondhand, which means it may not be representative of what you would expect to get were you to get it new. I've also done some little finishing bits, you might say, because it required some repair. When I got the sword secondhand, it arrived in a reasonable condition, but the scabbard didn't kind of lock in all the way. It kind of sat out like this, and I gave it a push, and that made the scabbard basically break. So I had to do some repair, and I did some other little touches while I was along the way. In terms of this particular stuff, I'll put dimensions and links and all that kind of stuff in the description down below, but I think this is discontinued. I'm not sure you can get it anymore, and I don't honestly know how much one is new, though probably somewhat prohibitively expensive. I don't personally think, spoiler alert, this is a particularly good product unless you happen to really like the look, because it is very dull looking. I love it. I think it's really cool. I'm glad that Cold Steel tried doing something like this because it's unique and different, and I haven't seen these really mass produced, at least not like this. So it's a handsome thing, and if you like it kind of hanging on a wall or sitting on a stand or something like that, then I think it's great. But as it is, it's also not terribly effective. I have some concerns which make it not particularly fun for me. This handle, which has a pretty robust hang and may operate as a good base to start a functional handle, and it grips well. It's just not, it's made of wood. There's nothing really holding it together, and these two little pegs aren't going to keep the slabs of wood on either side together if you strike hard on something. Not that this is necessarily a striking tool as much as a stabbing tool, but if you're parrying or operating this as some sort of defensive tool, then it's likely to take some shock, and I don't think this wood handle is going to really hold up to that kind of usage. So it's not a terribly effective weapon. It's a bit delicate though functional, and that's one of the reasons that I would say not particularly a fan other than the aesthetic side of it. But if I talk more about that, there's less pieces here, so I'm going to just focus on maybe the handle here. It doesn't have a fuchi, a kashira, a pommel, or anything like that. The shaping is interesting and different. There's some attempt to be ergonomic here, and I like it. It fits together well. There's two little spacers on either side, grommets, if you will, of where the makugi fit, and they don't hurt my hand very much. They have a ledge to them, and then the makugi do come out. I've taken this apart, but they don't feel aggressive or hurty in my hand when I hold it. And the paint job, I think, is overall pretty cool. And apart from the shaping and paint, I think that's kind of the coolest part of this particular product. I did take the handle off. I took these little pieces out. They required a little percussive maintenance, but they did come off after using a nail set and a rubber mallet, and then another rubber mallet to get the suba off. And the tang was, well, full of burrs and schmutz. I cleaned it up a little bit. It had like shims and burrs and metal shavings and stuff inside the handle. When I dumped it out and then I took the blade out, it doesn't rattle or anything like that, so I don't know why exactly those things were there, but overall it feels solid. I'm just somewhat concerned because this wood obviously isn't very robust. Kind of pushing it in the scabbard when I got it, about yay pressure, caused it to crack and break. That gives me the impression it's not going to probably hold up to aggressive usage, given that there's no cord, silk, there's no samegawa or anything holding this together apart from just being a bit of wood. So anyway, those are my thoughts. It does have a pretty robust hang in terms of the blade. This, if it was reinforced in some way, certainly has enough tang to be a functional blade, and it has a starting place to be a functional handle, but not quite there yet. At least I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in it. As I move on to the suba right here, this has some ledges and rough spots on it. Honestly, the suba is about as sharp as the blade is up here, meaning that neither one of them are particularly sharp, but this is enough to grind on your fingers and cause some pretty severe discomfort or draw a little bit of blood if you're holding it right up on the grip here. Not that you're necessarily supposed to do it, but this kind of ledge should have been adjusted prior to being sent out. At least it should have been in my mind, and you can't really fix it because you'll take away the blackening look if you take some sandpaper to it. So it's tough to address. But it's got more ledge on it than I would like. And the transitions between the suba on either side, because there's no seppa, there's no fuchi, no kasha, no habaki, it looks a little muddy and clumsy around the edges. I can kind of see light through some spots. I don't think it's particularly well done. If I talk about the scabbard here, well, this burst apart when I first got it, and it didn't come that way, but just pushing it in caused it to break, and it was very hard and to fiddle with and get it to fit right. So I kind of understand it was the widest part of the blade is down here, so getting a file in down in this spot is a little tricky without leaving it rattly and nasty up at the top. Anyway, it did break. I glued it together. I did my best to kind of address it, but honestly, it's not great. You can totally see where the crack happened, and it's all right. It stays together now, and I was able to get it cleaned up. There's a little leather strap in here too that helps keep it tensioned correctly and helps it slide in kind of somewhat gently, and that was another thing to futz with. Anyway, shape-wise, I like it. It's got this little knot down at the top. It's got a space for a tassel or a cord or something down here, which incidentally does go into the blade cavity area here, which is kind of odd. So air and moisture will go up into the spot from this hole here. Just, I suppose, bear that in mind. Otherwise, rounded along the back, it has kind of an octagonal or flat sides along this spot. And if it's sitting in your belt, this knot is certainly large enough to kind of catch it so that you could draw this one-handed. The tension on mine is a little tight right now because I left it tight. I just finished keeping it together. I want to give it a chance to settle before I futz around with it too much more. Now I'm going to talk about the blade, the pointy stabby part. It's got a triangular blade section, not a lot of distal taper. It's got a satin finish, which isn't particularly spectacular, no folding or fun metal bits to look at. The blade is only sharp about the last 5 inches, and it's only kind of sharp, and it's not really made to take an edge beyond that. It's really more than 1 millimeter thick in terms of bluntness right up into this point, and then it tapers down. So you could put an edge where you could kind of get a good cut in there, but it wouldn't be necessarily a very effective cutting tool. It's not necessarily meant to be. It's a thrusty boy, not a stabby boy. And the shape, this curve right here, allows you to kind of rest on the plate or something like that, push up, and the tip will allow you to travel rather than getting snagged on things right away. I don't think you'd be very effective, very lucky at stabbing through armor. It's thick, and potentially with a lot of force you could maybe drive it in and cause someone some discomfort, but I don't think it'd be very effective. Finding the gaps and moving through them, this would be a much more effective tool for that. As I move down the blade, well, you can see that it's got this bluing on it. It's fragile, and it's kind of rubbing off in spots. I like the look of it, but I don't like that it's starting to come off. And this little hook right here, you might think that this would be effective for binding, and it should be, but this one is not. It's just rounded and not finished in such a way that it's ever going to be effective, at least not without a lot of futzing. And I've got some examples to show you. So here's a busted katana, and if I bring this down and put it in a place where I'm supposed to be able to bind, well, if I twist, it just kind of pops out. So pops out, and then my digits are in danger. And if I really try to grab it, it just still slides around, and it's never secure. Even if I get the spine and I twist and I try to bind, it still just kind of slides around. There's not an area that's really secure, and I have to fight with it to get it to even stay. Otherwise, it just kind of pops and feels like it wants to escape. So not a very effective binding tool. By contrast, this is a European style sword breaker, and obviously it's got bigger gaps and teeth and things like that in it, but what it can do, and this is not necessarily a very effective angle, you would be using this, and then sword blow would come in and you would potentially grab it. But as I bind, and I'm going to be careful not to whack myself with it, if I try to pull these apart, I'm trying to pull them apart, but the teeth are kind of locking in and it holds together. So that is kind of the effect that I'm hoping for. Obviously, it's going to be much harder with this little space, but because it's rounded, if this blade comes in, it just pops out. I don't, and this would be the profile of blade potentially it would be trying to block. So it kind of might stop the blade from coming down into the tsuba, but it kind of just pops out and then puts my knuckles in danger. So not a very effective hook, and I don't think it's terribly representative of the things it's trying to emulate. Anyway, apart from that, the blade, I mean, if I kind of get down to I think it's worth it or not, I don't know what these go for, but as I recall, they were over $200 or something like that. I'll try to put what I can find in the description down below. I got it secondhand for a good deal, and I'm not complaining about it, but it's a handsome thing, and that would be why I'd recommend it. If you like it because it's handsome, go ahead and buy it, but I think it's not functional enough for me to say I would recommend it. At least I don't believe it is. It's got some deal breaker stuff. It's not particularly well refined. It's got some teeth on the edge, and this handle isn't constructed in a way that I'm overly confident it would survive even a lot of stabby stuff. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I hope you found the video somewhat useful. As always, cheers, and thanks for watching.